The United States Army's attack on Marye's Heights during the Battle of Fredericksburg, fought from the 11th through 15th of December, 1862, was a tragic moment in the already tragic American Civil War. The Federal Army aimed to dislodge the Confederates from a series of fortified positions, and Marye's Heights was among the most heavily fortified areas, with soldiers protected by a stone wall at the base of the ridge and multiple artillery batteries positioned above. 7 Federal divisions charged in 14 separate, poorly coordinated attacks. Not a single United States soldier made it to the wall. The Irish Brigade was part of one of those assaults, and while it failed just like the others, the bravery of the Irish was noticed by both sides, and it highlighted the fighting spirit of the unit. Every year on the anniversary of the battle, the 28th Massachusetts Company B pays homage to those who fought and fell with a 2-part ceremony at the Fredericksburg National Cemetery and the Irish Brigade Monument. Of the over 15,000 graves at the cemetery, only 2,643 are identified, with over 12,770 graves unknown. Of the identified graves, there are 3 28th Massachusetts soldiers who fell during the war, and we honor them with a simple wreath-laying ceremony. Private Thomas Lynch, a 32-year-old laborer from Boston, enlisted on September 2, 1862, and died of his Fredericksburg wounds on December 19, 1862. Private Peter Murphy, a 32-year-old sailor from Baltimore, drafted on August 10, 1863, and died of his Spotsylvania wounds on May 16, 1864. Sergeant Timothy Harrington, Company K, died on March 11, 1863. After laying wreaths at the cemetery, we moved to the city docks to lay a wreath at the Irish Brigade Monument located where the unit spent the night before the fateful day, and also the site of the Middle Crossing. Many of us take the time to walk the route of the Irish Brigade, as well as many other units that charged that day. We started at the Red Star, at the intersection of Hanover Street and Kenmore Avenue. This is the location where the Irish Brigade crossed the Millrace, the canal in 1862, and now Kenmore Avenue, annotated by the yellow line. At the beginning of the battle, smart-thinking Union leaders had dammed and drained it, yet it still held a few feet of water and broke up the unit formations as they moved across it either over planks or by wading. The 28th Massachusetts crossed here and formed up under the cover of the terrain with the rest of the brigade, as noted by the blue line, with the 28th represented in the center in green. Scores of Federal soldiers went down in this area, with one man calling the Millrace the Valley of Death. It is generally understood that the brigade's right flank, the 69th New York, rested loosely on Hanover Street, and that 1,200 men of the brigade stretched between Hanover and Lafayette Street, with 116th Pennsylvania holding the left flank. Development has destroyed any semblance of the battlefield, so following the exact route of the attack, annotated with the green arrow, is impossible. For our purposes, we will follow Hanover Street, which represented the loose trace of the brigade's right flank and noted by the red line. One can also walk up Mercer, Charlotte, Wolfe, and Lafayette Streets to follow the route of the brigade, as well as all the other attacks that day.
After crossing the stream, a sharp rise in the ground hid the regiment from the enemy and gave the men a chance to take a breath and dress the ranks. Here the thought occurred to me, how different is the real battle from that which one's imagination had pictured. St. Clair, Mulholland, 116th Pennsylvania.
As a unit made its way across the open fields of 1862, they needed to step over the devastation of those killed and wounded in the previous assaults. The brigade continued to advance across open fields towards the stone wall at the base of Marye's Heights under artillery and musket fire. The 28th Massachusetts had the honor of carrying the only green regimental flag that day, the battle-torn flags of the 3 New York regiments having been sent back to New York City. In their stead, General Marye ordered the men to put boxwood in their caps and laurels around the remaining colors. The soldiers moved with discipline and determination despite being met with a hail of musket and cannon fire. Iron and lead tore through their ranks just as it had to the brigades that went before them, and would with those that would follow. If you notice up ahead, you will see the crest of a hill that then falls back away. This small, seemingly inconsequential terrain feature would come to mean everything to hundreds of soldiers. A number of period buildings remain. Here we are passing the Rowe House, built in 1828 and witness to the battle. Hanover Street, the road we are walking on, is represented by the yellow arrow. The general route of the attack angles slightly to the left, as noted by the green arrow. So why of the 14 separate assaults against Marye's Heights is the Irish Brigade assault so well remembered? One must remember that during the 1860s, the Irish were near the very bottom of the country's social hierarchy, the country generally not accepting of their Irish lineage, their immigrant status, nor their Catholic religion. The assault did much to change the narrative, showcasing the Irish's determination, discipline, and dedication to the country. In addition, while many veterans just assumed to forget the battle, Irish groups successfully banded together to ensure the story of the brigade's assault was never forgotten. While the focus of this video is on the 20th Massachusetts, it's important to remember how many other units assaulted unsuccessfully across this very ground. Division after division, brigade after brigade, regiment after regiment, each one needing to move over the growing numbers of wounded and dead from the preceding attacks. What the men in the assaulting waves thought while looking over the scene in front of them can only be imagined. And this was not the last time these fields would see an assault. Less than half a year later, the United States Army would finally take the heights during the Second Battle of Fredericksburg, which was part of the Chancellorsville campaign. This area is certainly hallowed ground, if there ever was any. We are now at the intersection of Hanover Street and Little Page Street. While small groups of men did move beyond this point and some made it to within 40 yards of the wall, this generally represents as far as many Union soldiers made it that day. Marye's Heights can be seen in the distance and was described as a volcano, belching smoke, fire, and death to those soldiers trapped in the fields. Desperate for any cover they could find, many soldiers took cover in what is known as the Swale, which was identified earlier in this video. It is a barely noticeable small rise that gives someone just enough cover to protect themselves from the fire from Marye's Heights at the front. However, the depression was not often enough. If you move south or to your left to Mercer Street, it is preserved well enough for one to lie down and get a sense of the feelings the soldiers had. Pinned down, unable to move, stacking the bodies of fellow soldiers in front of them for some cover. Many battlefields have terrain features like the Swale, small undulations in the ground protecting soldiers at places like Gettysburg to Cold Harbor, and it is only by visiting those battlefields and seeing the terrain in person can one truly appreciate that a few-inch rise in the ground was the difference between life and death for so many.
The only possible shelter we could have from the murderous fire were the dead bodies of our comrades that we would pile up as best we could and get behind. Sergeant, 116th Pennsylvania.
Our men were mowed down like grass before the scythe of the reaper.
The soldiers were not there to fight, only to die. Officer of the Irish Brigade.
And now we see the field from the Confederate perspective, looking straight down Mercer Street, where we just were. At the time of the battle, this was open fields, dotted by a few houses and fences. This small area saw close to 1,000 United States soldiers killed and thousands more wounded, all for nothing. The Irish Brigade suffered devastating losses, with more than 550 of its 1,200 men killed, wounded, or missing. Like all the other attacks against Marye's Heights, their attack failed to penetrate the Confederate defenses. However, the brigade's valor earned the respect from Confederate and Union alike, and the attack remains a poignant example of the immigrant contributions and sacrifices during the Civil War. Confederate Lieutenant General James Longstreet said of the charge of Marye's Irish Brigade,
"The manner in which Marye's Irish Brigade breasted the death storm from Marye's Heights of Fredericksburg was the handsomest thing in the whole war. 6 times in the face of a withering fire, before which whole ranks were mowed down as corn before the sickle, did the Irish Brigade run up that hill, rush to inevitable death."
We hope you enjoyed this video, and we welcome anyone to join us in our annual dedication as a member of our unit or a supporter. Fa, Ah, Bala.